tremendous privilege and honor to be here today. I just think just so exciting to see this happening. I was telling them over there, I definitely need this in Manhattan. This is powerful. This is really powerful. But before I start, just a quick question. Are there any New York Giants fans here? Any? We have one. The hand went down kind of quick. All right, we got one. I'll be more regional. Any Houston Texan fans? Houston? Okay, couple. Not a bad year. Excellent. Dallas Cowboy fans? All right. Hey, you won a playoff game. That's good. I'm sorry. Too soon. Sorry. I hate to ask this, but I always do. Any New England Patriot fans, by any chance? We have one. Two, three. Okay. All right. Congratulations. Good year. See, the funny thing about this, though, is whether you're a Giants fan, Cowboys fan, Texans fan, Patriots fan, this is not about football. As you saw in that piece that ESPN so graciously did, you'll know that I'm not a professional football player. My regular job is I teach ninth grade world history. I'm a freshman world history teacher. So when the Giants called me up to speak to the team, I can honestly tell you I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a prank because in my mind I figured, why would you call up a history teacher to speak to your football team? It doesn't make any sense. They said, no, Mr. Gonzalez, we understand what you do. Can you speak to our team this Friday night, yes or no? Now, I live 5 minutes from MetLife Stadium where the Giants play their home game, so I figured even if this was a prank, I could always turn my car around, no harm done. But I remember pulling up to the facility, giving my name, and the security guard telling me, please park to the right. I started to get nervous. Went to the facility, then into the team room for the first time, and the whole team was there. I remember even one of the first players to stand up and shake my hand was a defensive lineman on the team at the time. His name was Chris Canty, and as he stood up and he shook my hand, also, just so you know, Chris Canty's about 6'9", around 320 pounds. And I remember as he shook my hand, though, I felt his fingers go all the way down to here on my wrist. And I remember he looked down at me, and half joking but half serious, he simply said, you better tell us something good tonight. No pressure, right? Speak to the Giants for 20 minutes. I walk out of those locker room doors, and if you were to run up to me and ask me how I thought I did, I would have said it was a waste of time. I would have said it was a failure. I would have said the only reason they probably were paying attention is because the Giants have a team rule that if you're on your cell phone during an official team meeting, you get fined up to $5,000. As a teacher, I wish we had that in the classroom, but that's not important right now. See, it's funny though, because I'm pretty sure we could go around this room at each table, and we could all talk about meetings we walked out of that at the time seemed like a complete waste of time. Phone calls we took that when we hung up, we thought we could never get that 15 minutes of our life back. But then in hindsight, some of those meetings and phone calls were some of the greatest things that ever happened to us. But we couldn't see it at the time. Like I said, when I walked out of that locker room, I thought they could care less what a ninth grade world history teacher has to say. But it's amazing how much power our words and our actions can have. They won the next game. The next game, people start calling me and texting me saying, you spoke to the team, they're winning, that's why. I said, well, they're professional athletes, they're paid to do that. But then Fox News starts calling up to be on their show every Saturday morning called Fox and Friends leading up to the Super Bowl. And then radio stations like Mike and Mike in the Morning called to be on their show. And finally, ESPN, they come down from Connecticut, they taped that whole piece you saw, and they said, Mr. Gonzalez, if the Giants beat the 49ers in the NFC Championship, we will play that Super Bowl Sunday in front of the world. Giants beat the 49ers. I then get invited to go to the Super Bowl, but I knew as a teacher, if I went to the Super Bowl, I was going to miss teaching my students for a while, so I called them back and I said, no, thank you. Also, as a teacher, I'd used up all my sick days, so I really couldn't take off anyway. Constraints of a teacher, but I remember going to school the day after they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and as I turned the corner to go into my building, there was news vans lined up down the block in front of my high school. I don't really know why they're there, but I keep walking, and the principal's waiting on the steps for me. He runs up to me, said, Mr. Gonzalez, follow me. We go right into the main office. He says, don't even bother to sign in, right into our high school's conference room, and there's reporters waiting from CBS to NBC to ABC. I mean, even CNN Espanol had come up from Mexico. I don't speak Spanish, but we got the Spanish teacher. She translated everything, worked out fine. And I've learned since then, but the next day, self-admittedly, I didn't walk to school, I ran to school, because I figured, of course, who was going to put me on the big screen. But it's funny, when I turned the corner that Tuesday morning, it was nobody. It's funny because fame is only that quick, isn't it? I signed my name in to start teaching world history, and the secretary interrupted me. She said, someone called this morning. They wanted you to return it as soon as you could. I returned the call, and it's a team. they're saying they're having this victory parade in New York City, and they're wondering if I could join them. I get permission from my principal, and as I go into New York City that morning, I begin to see T-shirts. The first couple of shirts I saw, I thought, well, that might be a coincidence. Then I start seeing hundreds and thousands of the same exact shirt. Finally, one of the players hands me a shirt on the float. He said, I think you'll like the 2 words we wanted on our Super Bowl championship shirt this year. And the 2 words the Giants put on the shirt, 2 words were all in. And I said, man, that's pretty great. So I go back to show my students. In first period, they think it's awesome. By third period, they could care less. And I took the shirt, and I remember putting it on my desk, and the phone rang. I pick up the phone, and a voice said, are you Mr. Gonzalez? I said, yes. They said, the same one that talked to the Giants that they wanted to win the Super Bowl. I said, yes, again. Now, at this point in the conversation, the voice started getting very angry, saying words I would never repeat up here in front of you. I interrupt the voice, and I say, sir, why are you angry? Who is this? He said, well, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm one of the football coaches for the high school you work at. Man, you could have told us about all in. Our football team could win some games, too. And I said, Coach, I had no idea it was going to have that effect. He said, it's okay, but we start preseason conditioning in 3 weeks. We would really enjoy you to come down to this weight room and talk to our players. I said, Coach, anything for our students. So 3 weeks later, I walked down to our weight room. And interesting enough, every football player in our high school is, of course, wearing a T-shirt. And there's 2 words on their T-shirt as well. Now, in Union City, New Jersey, we're a little unique. We don't have as much room horizontally as a lot of school districts do, so we actually built our football field 4 stories up on the roof of our building. It's a little different. Fences all the way around. No one falls off, in case you're wondering, but it's honestly a great place to watch a game on a Friday night. It's beautiful. And I said, we're done. 2 weeks later, there was another phone call. Mr. Gonzalez, yes. Well, Mr. Gonzalez, you spoke to the Giants. Well, Mr. Gonzalez, could you share for our team? I said, sure, give me your address during the weekend. I could see if I could drive out there. They said, actually, Mr. Gonzalez, we need you to take the first plane to Chicago. I said, well, I'm a teacher. They said, no, we understand that. That's why we called your superintendent. He's already given you the day off. And I was going to argue with my superintendent, so I get on a plane to Chicago, and there's a team waiting there. They had just flown into town. They're called the Portland Trailblazers. And they decided they want to make this as their warm-up shirt that night against the Bulls and speak to the team. Great group of guys, CJ, Damian, amazing players. They haven't won a championship recently, so we probably shouldn't talk about them anymore, but they're on their way. They're playing well. And then a phone call all the way from London, England. They said, Mr. Gonzalez, we know you work with an American football team, but here in London, we play real football. Of course, it's soccer. And I said, well, honestly, I don't have much experience playing soccer. They said, that's okay. Just come on over. So in the summer, I fly over to London. There's a team waiting in the English Premier League. They're known as the Arsenal Football Club. And they decided to put all in on the back of their shirts, and great group of guys having a pretty good season. I come back to the United States, however, and I'm greeted by a phone call from our FBI. It is hard to return a phone call to the FBI, but they said, don't worry, you're not in any trouble. We did happen to hear a little bit about your story. Would you mind speaking for our federal agents conference? I said I would try my best. Now, the interesting thing about the FBI is they don't give you a great T-shirt or a jersey, but they did happen to provide me with one of these. Don't really know what they were thinking, but good to have in case of emergencies, I guess. Then corporations get involved. And first it was PNC Bank, will you speak for our conferences, to General Motors, will you help us in some of our new initiatives, and they made this shirt. And then even getting a phone call to go down to Arkansas. And I'd never been to Arkansas before, but it turned out to be a company that I was familiar with as well. They're called Walmart. And I thought, all right, a local Walmart, shop there, but they said, actually, Mr. Gonzalez, this is not just a local Walmart. This is our shareholders meeting here in Bentonville. It's a very important day for us. I probably didn't realize how important it was. So I remember sitting backstage and someone tapping me on my left shoulder and turning to see who it was, and it was the actor, Tom Cruise. And I was like, wow. And so I stand up to shake his hand, and at that point I realized Tom Cruise is only about that tall, so I felt much better about myself. But a great actor, love his movies. But for me personally, I always tell everyone that the biggest honor for me, a lot of my students, they enjoy playing video games. And a lot of the video games they enjoy, you interact in the life of a soldier, complete different missions. I always remind them, though, it's one thing to play a video game. It's something else entirely, getting the honor and privilege to actually work with our armed forces. First, it was speaking to our cadets at the West Point Military Academy, and then out west and with our Air Force. And then every summer, my biggest honor is to go to bases around our country and work with our United States Army. And one of the bases actually put this on the back of their shirt. Now I feel who better to represent being all in than our armed forces men and women who give their very lives for our liberties and freedoms we enjoy every day. We need to give them a round of applause for their sacrifice for our country. It's incredible what they do. Incredible. But the sad part is at the end of the day, a lot of people don't get it. Some of you know what that feels like. Maybe in certain matters with risks you've taken. You know what it is to give your best and people just not understand. Tell you things like, why are you doing that? It's not your job. Why do you care so much? Some people will never get it, I suppose. But I hope it never comes to the day that that's any one of us. I was in San Diego not long ago, and an individual walked up to me after speaking for his corporation. He said, "Mr. Gonzalez, thank you for your time, but honestly, I think you're making a big mistake." I was taken back by the comment. He said, "Please don't take any offense. See, this all-in thing is a really great slogan." You understand what a slogan is, right, Mr. Gonzalez? It's like Nike's Just Do It. I work in marketing, and we use slogans all the time, help stay in people's mindsets, maybe generate more profit. But he said, you enjoy working with kids. No offense, teaching, there's just not a lot of profit there. I said, well, you're right, but for me, all in is not a slogan. It's something I try to live every single day for those around me. He said, that's great, but it's on t-shirts, it's on wristbands. He said, if you haven't noticed, Adidas was even using it at the end of their TV commercials a couple of years ago. Pretty sure they didn't send you any royalties. And he said, if you don't mind me asking, I just have to know, how much money do you really make per year? I said, you know what, sir, I'm going to tell you a short story, and then I got to go. I began to tell him about a young woman who was sitting in a doctor's office. And most of the time we're at the doctor's, we can honestly say we'd prefer not to be there. We just want to get it over with. But as she's sitting there, she's beyond excited. Her name is called. She gets up, pretty much runs past the nurse into the examination room, sits up on the table, and lays back. She's so excited to be at the doctor's that day because she's going to see her child. She's pregnant. And as she lays back on the table and the images begin to flicker on the screen, she gets overjoyed, hearing the heartbeat. Everything seems great, except the doctor walks out of the room and the nurse follows. The nurse returns with a small card in her hand, hands it to her on the table, and then exits again. The woman's curious, so she opens the card, begins to read it. It says, we're sorry to inform you, but you've contracted the measles. Nothing's wrong with getting the measles. You get some small bumps, a fever, a flu, a couple of weeks, it can pass. But if you get the measles during this stage, we fear it's going to have very dangerous side effects. Also on the card, it said we cannot see certain limbs developing properly. We cannot see a properly developed arm or leg. And on the bottom of the card, it said, it's in our opinion that you and your husband consider termination. Try again later at another time. Woman is crushed. She went from being absolutely ecstatic to distraught in a matter of moments. The nurse returns to the room and said, Miss, I know this is very challenging, but how would you choose to proceed? The woman sits up off the table. She says, thank you for your opinion. Thank you for your advice. But I'm going to stick with him. Whether he makes it for 2 more weeks or lives for 20 years, whether he has one properly developed arm or no arms for that matter. That's my choice. See, honestly, I'm so thankful for that woman, because that woman is my mom. And I was a child inside of her that day in the doctor's office. For me, that's what all in means. It's not a t-shirt. It's not a wristband. It's not even a Super Bowl trophy. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a privilege to be a part of the New York Giants organization. A couple of years ago, they asked if I would come on as working under the Office of Player Engagement for David Tyree and be a chaplain on the team. I told them that my community had to come first. Interesting enough, they worked around my schedule, so a couple of days after school, I'll go over to the facility, work with some of the players, jump on the team playing every weekend during the football season. If you look very closely on Sundays, you can see me on the sidelines. Sometimes I get to give Eli or Saquon a high five after a good play. It's fun. But that's not all in. See, we know it's very easy to be committed to something when you never lost. Everyone gives their best when you win, when you have a good month, good quarter, great year. See, you only really know if you're truly committed when things don't go your way. When you don't just lose one game, but you go on a losing streak. You don't just have a bad day. You have a bad career and a whole entire field, it feels like. See, it's interesting because when you're truly all in, you realize that it's going to take pain. We hate pain. That's why a lot of people don't do it. We crave comfort. See, I always remind our players, especially as we get ready for OTAs that start soon, that pleasure has killed more careers than pain ever has. It does. We seek comfort, so the idea of giving our best and everyone's seeing it, me loving my wife to the fullest extent, what if she doesn't return it back? Loving my son, and he still closes the door in my face. He doesn't return my calls. That's scary. That's fear-inducing. So it's a lot easier to go halfway, and when it doesn't work out, we can always say, I guess I didn't really try. It's comfortable. That's what it is to go all in, I feel, to give your very best. See, in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? What's the greatest thing you could do? And it's interesting because he responded with 3 sections, but they all were prefaced with the word all. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. All, not some. Jesus didn't get a little bit crucified. He got all. Love does that. True love gives all. I would love to say I was like this my whole life, but I wasn't. My dad, he was a free agent cornerback for the Oakland Raiders growing up, so I thought I was going to play football like him. It was my dream in life to be a player. You might remember his name was Dan Marino. He was a quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. I wanted to be just like him growing up. Hispanic version, but just like him. And I started getting hit in high school a little bit harder than it was in Pop Warner, and I wasn't the biggest anymore. My mother got scared and said, you're not going to suffer a permanent injury like your father did. I'm not going to sign the waiver this sophomore year of playing. It crushed me, so I did the next best thing possible. I started playing basketball. But I realized very quickly at my high school that when you played basketball and you lost a game, especially a home game, and your whole school saw you, you didn't show up the next day. You didn't want to be made fun of in the homeroom or have your decisions questioned in the lunchroom, so I would skip. But I had this one teacher. His name was Mr. Phillips. You know, it's funny because I'm pretty sure we could also go around the room again. We all had at least one teacher in our life, didn't we? Some of us, we had more, but we all had at least one. You probably still see their face. Hear the words they would use in class. They would tell the same jokes over and over, but we still laughed because they were our favorite. It wasn't embarrassing to actually go up to them in the local food store and say hi, or when they attended a sporting event at the high school. Mine was Mr. Phillips. I remember he asked me to stay after the end of 5th period history, and yeah, he was a history teacher. It's funny because when you meet people that are that committed and passionate about what they do, they don't really have to ask you what you want to do with your life. You kind of just say, I want to be like you. It's funny that way. But I remember he cornered me in 5th period history, and he said, Mr. Gonzalez, why aren't you in my class the day after the basketball team loses? I explained I had a special type of illness, of course. He was smart. He said, I don't think so. He said, Mr. Gonzalez, I fear for you because you're so scared to lose, you might not ever win in life. I was taken back by the comment. I said, Mr. Phillips, you're not even a basketball coach. I don't really know if you can say that. He said, you're right, I'm not. But he said, the great men and women that we study in these books, thousands of years later, they gave everything they had, win or lose. Please choose quickly. He went on to explain of a president who lost over 8 elections, but then he's on every single $5 bill and penny in our United States now, of an inventor who wanted to invent a better light bulb, and he tried 10 different ways, 15 different ways, hundreds of different ways, and he failed every time. Reporters come up to him and say, Mr. Edison, you failed hundreds of times, don't you think it's time to give up? He said, sir, as I've not failed, I just found another way not to get it right. As a teacher, I'm careful telling that story in my classroom because students will come up and explain they didn't fail the test, they just found another way not to pass it. I tell them they failed, but Thomas Edison is not the world's biggest failure. He's probably one of the greatest inventors ever walked on this earth. Weren't afraid to give everything. In the case of Abraham Lincoln, he did give everything, didn't he? See, we're challenged with that every day. See, when I spoke to the Giants, people think I talked about football. I never talked to the Giants about football. They'll know more about that than I ever will. But that night, specifically before the Jets game a couple of years ago, I just asked them one question. I said, what does it mean to be committed? I opened up in Matthew chapter 1, first book of the New Testament. And you see a story of a guy there named Joseph. He doesn't have a book named after him. And he's really not mentioned a whole bunch after that. But when you read starting in verse 22, it says this is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. Joseph was engaged to Mary. But Mary walks in and says, hey, I'm pregnant, but don't worry, it's from God. I don't know about that. As a man, anyway. And he said he was a good man. We're not talking about a dirtbag here. This is a good man. That's what it says in the word. So he wanted to get rid of her quietly so she wouldn't suffer execution, because stoning was the rule of the day. And as he wanted to get rid of her quietly, he's visited by an angel. And it's amazing because when we really decide to give our best to something, God knows it's scary. Because what's the first words the angel says to him after he addresses him by name? Joseph, do not be afraid. It's funny, you look throughout the Bible, you think, oh, wow, I can never associate with people from the Bible. They must be like these superhuman saints. Every single book, every single man, an angel will visit them and will pretty much say the same thing. Don't fear. Joshua, Jeremiah, don't be afraid of them. Gideon, don't fear. See, that's amazing that we have a God that knows us that personally. He knows we're scared. It's hard for us to admit as men, but he knows it's fearful. But he said, let's go anyway. Because the chances are, if you're scared to do it, you can't do it on your own. And that's exactly how he likes it. That day on with my history teacher, I started giving everything. I guess it was a divine appointment, and I got pretty good. Went from barely playing a sport I'd never played before, basketball, to being all-state within 3 years. I even got selected to play on this team to represent the whole state of New Jersey and play in the national championships for high school basketball in Disney World. We won. We were high school national champions. Our coach was very excited for us. He said he was going to take us someplace very special to eat that night as high school national champions. He took us to Denny's. Denny's is great, but the Grand Slam only goes so far. And I do remember sitting at Denny's, and my point guard is on my left-hand side, and he just got a full scholarship to play at Villanova. We're excited for him. You know, all the times we'll watch him play on ESPN, and another guy at the table, his name is JJ. He got a full scholarship to go to Duke, and we're excited to watch him play too. And it's funny because everyone around the table is going to these great Division I universities. Everyone except me. The scout said I was too small to play my position at that level. And the Division II colleges said I didn't shoot enough three-point shots. So the only place I could play college basketball was a small school in the middle of New Jersey called Montclair State University. Montclair State's a great school, don't get me wrong, but we never play on ESPN. We don't give athletic scholarships as Division III, and our jerseys weren't made by Nike or Adidas. Those are my 3 qualifications as a good college, as a senior in high school. Shallow, I know, but they didn't have any of them. And remember, they get to me at the table and they said, John Paul, where are you going to school? You've been quiet. So I told them, and they laughed. That's usually how it's going to be met when you tell people what you're feeling called to give your best for. Maybe you get a polite smile, nod of the head, but you know once the conversation breaks and they turn to talk to someone, they're talking about how crazy you are. Why would you choose that? It was similar at that table in Orlando, Florida, in Denny's, but I said, you know, guys, just because I'm not going Division I doesn't mean I can't practice like it. So I'd get up every day at 5 a.m. and shoot 500 shots before practice. Didn't have a dorm on campus, so I put 2 chairs together in the library, would sleep there in between classes. Still saving up for that first car, so often would take the bus home. But it's amazing how good you can get at something when you choose to give everything. Don't hold back. My senior year, I'm blessed to be a first-team All-American. I'm averaging 30 points a game, and I get a phone call in the athletic director's office I wasn't expecting. I pick up the phone, and a voice said, Mr. Gonzalez, we've noticed your talent at a lower level. We'd like to invite you to be part of the 2007 NBA draft workout. Do you accept? I tried to play it cool, so I remember responding back saying, I'll see if I'm free that night. I was free. Don't get picked as high as Kevin Durant and Greg Oden, who are the top picks in the draft, but finally get scooped up as a free agent by a team called the LA Clippers. So excited to prove what I could do. I fly out to Los Angeles, and I remember the first day of training, they brought us in a room about 3 times the size of this room. Outside the door, it said weight room, so I'm expecting we're going to lift some weights, and I'm pretty confident in that, but as we get in the room, there's no weights. There's no barbells, no benches, no dumbbells. I go up to the trainer and said, sir, how can you see how strong we are if there's no equipment? My bench press numbers are pretty good. He said, Mr. Gonzalez, we really don't need all that. We just need to know if you can lift yourself. They would bring us in there, they would put 5 minutes on the clock, and they made us do push-ups for 5 minutes straight, no stopping. When you couldn't push yourself up another inch because your arms would begin to shake, they would ask you to turn on your side and hold something called a plank. You can't hold it any longer. You begin to bend in half. They would get you up and ask you to run full-court sprints, no jogging. When you couldn't take another step because the pain in your side was unbearable, they would line you up against the back wall and ask you to do the high school favorite wall sits. 2 players, I remember they got released within an hour, handed plane tickets. Never got a chance to even touch a basketball. So one morning as I'm doing push-ups, an amazing idea comes to my mind. It simply said, John Paul, you're out of shape. See, when things got tough before, I always looked for a way out. But as a professional, I fell in the poor habit that when things got tough, I would just look for someone to blame. It's easier that way, isn't it? First summer league game in Las Vegas, I wasn't playing well, so I went up to the team manager and asked for a new pair of sneakers, arguing that the Adidas shoes they gave me, they weren't like the ones I was used to. It was throwing off my jump shot. Blame your equipment, it just makes sense. 2 games in, still not playing well, I asked the assistant coach for a lineup change, debating whether the teammates they paired me with, we had enough chemistry yet. Blame my teammates. About my 3rd game, I remember sitting in this beautiful house they gave me on Venice Beach. I had the audacity to call up my agent and ask how long the coach would be under contract. Didn't know if I could mesh with his playing philosophy. But see, when you're face down doing a push-up every morning, you realize very quickly there's only one thing that keeps you down there. It has nothing to do with the sneakers on your feet, your teammates, or even your leader, and everything to do with your body weight, yourself. See, the biggest battle we fight with being all in every day is usually against us. We can blame our wives, blame those around us on our teams, at work, or in our communities. Even blame what we have or don't have. But usually it's a fight against us. You look at the Apostle Paul in the Bible, that's what he talks about constantly. And I personally feel we give the devil way too much credit for way too many things. And really it's about the battle we have to face in the morning. Do we press snooze, or do we give it 10 minutes earlier to hit our knees and pray? That's us against us. See, in Union City, we have 90,000 people that live in 1 square mile. It's the most densely populated city in all of the United States, little fact. But in this 1 square mile, we have no YMCA or Boys and Girls Club. So when 300 students try out for the basketball team in our high school, you can only take 30. So 270 students, they just want to be part of a team. So they join one, the wrong one, on the street corner. They join a gang. And I used to be really content sitting in the teacher's lounge, blaming our local politicians, saying if we just had better ones, my students wouldn't get shot at night. But when you're all in, you don't enjoy talking about problems as much as you do asking if you can be a solution. So by God's grace, I started renting this building on the edge of our town. It's nothing that special. It's only about 2,500 square feet. I said, we're going to open this up every day for kids after school, free of charge, under the age of 21, 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And it's funny because we opened up and only 5 kids showed up the first day. My teacher friends asked me next morning, they said, how'd it go? I said, well, we got 5. They smiled and they said, what are you going to do with 5? How can 5 really truly make a difference? I said, I don't know. But if one of them brings their friend tonight, we'll have 6. And we can play 3-on-3 basketball. I don't know, I think it's worth it. That was 24 months ago. When I stopped by our center before coming out here last night, we signed up student 1,837. Is it gonna last for 10 years? I don't know. Honestly, the lease is up in 9 months. But you know, tonight when I get back, we sign up student 1,038, 39. Is it worth it? I think so. Just because it's 1, not because it's a big number. That's what Jesus talked about a man who left 99 sheep for 1. That was us. They're worth it. A lot of people say, John Paul, that's great, but you know, to be all in, it's got to be something big. It can't be little things here and there. I honestly disagree. See, the greatest changes in history, they never started big, did they? They started small. Like I said, when I spoke to the Giants that night, I just asked them what it meant to be committed. Talk to them about Joseph. I tried to use an analogy. Maybe I thought they would understand because some of them were getting a little hazy on the Bible. So I said, all right, guys, let's use a little bit of a different analogy. Let's say we're all playing a huge game of poker, everybody in the room. And everyone at once decides to push their chips in the middle of the table. What would that signify? Justin Tuck was on the team at the time. I remember he raised his hand in the back of the room. He said, well, that means you're all in. You're ready to win. You're done going halfway. You're done just acting. I said, okay. Now, if you push all your chips in the middle of the table, but then you look at your cards and you feel a little insecure. You're not sure if you're going to win, and you try to pull your chips back and explain to everyone you were just kidding about it. What would happen? He said, well, if you're playing poker at my house, there's a good chance you're going to get punched in the face. I said, Justin, you're right. If we would never do that in a poker game at your house. Why do we do it with our lives? Why do we say we're going to be committed, and when things get difficult, we start planning our exit strategy? And I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't get personal with him that night. I said, why do we as men say we're going to love our wives and girlfriends, and when things get difficult in that house, we walk out the front door and say the kids are not my responsibility? So I gave him a chip, gave him a marker. I said, guys, there's nothing special about this chip. It's not magic. It's not blessed. But guys, you take this chip and you sign it. Put it someplace you see it every single day. Just ask yourself a simple question. Am I giving my God-given best as if he was watching? Some guys took the chip and they said they signed it and they put it in their locker to see. They would touch it before they hit the field that season. Said it helped them play better, I guess. But other guys took the chip and said, I'm all in for football. But you're right. I haven't been very committed at home. I'm going to take this chip, put it in the middle of my kitchen table, explain to my family what it means. One of the guys in the video, Antrell, he sent me a Twitter message 2 weeks after they won the Super Bowl to show me he got the words all in tattooed across his chest. I said, Antrell, I never said to do that. He said, you know why I did it, John Paul? I did it because if it's just a t-shirt, I can put it on and take it off in front of other people whenever it looks good. But he said, I want to be reminded of it when I look in the bathroom mirror when I wake up in the morning, because when you're really committed to doing something, it's what you do when no one's watching that makes the most difference. And he's right. It's what we do when no one's watching that truly changes everything. What we do when no one's there at 2 o'clock in the morning, what we watch, what we see, what we say. A lot of people come up to me and they say, John Paul, what's your all in? I remember being in Hong Kong and a guy asking me through a translator, so I simply just took off this ring. See, I put 2 words on the inside of it. Because even though I come from a city where most of my students have no idea where their father is, I made a promise that my 2-year-old daughter, her name is Bella, she's going to know who I am because I'm not going anywhere. That's where it starts for me. Where do I keep my chip? It's part of the story a lot of people say I'm foolish for. But as we know, when we choose to be all in, we stop caring what people had to say a long time ago. Called up my agent in Los Angeles, California. I said, I don't want to continue to play professional basketball. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I pray and I feel I'm supposed to go back to my city. You mean, oh, to play for the Nets? I said, no. I think it's to go back to my city and do something different. Because I said the biggest thing that changed my life, it wasn't just watching someone's highlights on SportsCenter or buying their jersey at the store. The greatest thing that changed it were the people who chose to be in it. My volunteer Little League coach, my pastor, my teachers. So I came back home and became the greatest thing I felt I was called to become, a public school teacher. Yeah, there's definitely less zeros in your paycheck from the NBA to being a school teacher, but when I look at the faces of those I get to be with every day, it's priceless. You know that look that someone gives you, and you can tell they respect you, they trust you, because you look at them as not just a number or a dollar figure, but you look at them as a person. Can you buy that look? You can't. See, we know at the end of the day, the greatest thing about being all in is it has nothing to do with any of us. When I came back, I wanted to help kids so bad, but I didn't know in the state of New Jersey you need something called a teacher certificate to teach. So I started going to college to get one, but I went to the only place that would open up their doors I could work with kids. I went to jail. I started tutoring in juvenile detention centers across our state to get ready to be a teacher, and one of the wardens of the jail recognized me. He said, hey, you're that basketball player. I said, well, I used to play. Now I'm getting ready to be an educator. He said, no, this is a good thing. I would like to start a basketball team in this jail. I want to be just like that movie, The Gridiron Gang, and you look a little bit like The Rock, so maybe this could work out. I said, honestly, sir, I believe that's an exaggeration, but sure, let's give it a try. So we start playing basketball in jail, and it starts to work. Eventually, the state decided they want to buy us uniforms to make the experience more authentic. They said, well, what do you want on the jerseys? Obviously, we're in jail. It's got to be something tough. I said, I don't think so. I said, if you allow me to be in charge of this program, I only want 2 words. And these are the words on the jerseys in jail. See, on the first side is hope. People call me naive, but, well, according to the Bible, this is one of the greatest things we have. There's a movie I enjoy a lot. You might have seen it before. It's called The Shawshank Redemption. You might remember a quote at the end of that movie. It says, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. A good thing like that doesn't truly die. It's true. When we think about the times in our life that we've given hope to somebody else, it didn't die, did it? See, the greatest thing about giving hope, this is our reverse side when we change colors, is when we give others hope, they start to believe they can have this, a future. If you know your word, you know it's Jeremiah 29:11. See, the reason I finished with this is because a lot of people say, John Paul, you didn't explain one thing. Why did the Giants call you up in the first place if you were just a teacher? I said, that's a great question. I asked them that too. I said, how'd you even get my number? They said, well, Mr. Gonzalez, 3 years ago, you were in jail, weren't you? I said, well, a tutor in jail. It's a little different. They said, no, we understand. I said, well, Mr. Gonzalez, one of those jails you were tutoring at, playing basketball, it was half a mile away from our practice facility. You didn't know this, but there were people there who knew people that worked here. We thought it was a pretty good story we'd want to let our players know about, a little bit different. Plus our speaker canceled. Thought we'd give you a shot. I like to remind my students that they don't see me on sidelines Sunday afternoons because I sent my resume in a whole bunch of times to try to get 1 million views on YouTube, their version of making it. I like to remind them I'm only there because I wanted to do it for the least of these. I thought nobody was watching. I think we all know that our greatest opportunities in life, they never came in a boardroom. The ones we're excited to tell our children, our grandchildren, they're not about numbers at the end of a check. The things we're most excited to tell them about are the things we do on a rainy Tuesday. Nobody sees it but us. When we treat someone like a brother, like a sister, like a son, like a daughter. And we have no idea how much the difference it made until long after it's gone. You might have noticed at your tables that there's chips. Now, first thing about the chips, just so you know, I was told don't try to go to a local casino with these. You could get arrested. Fraudulent chips is what they said. But I'd be honored if before you leave here today, in the next couple of minutes, you take a chip. If you want, there's markers on the table. You could sign it, or maybe you don't sign it till this weekend. You sign it. You put it someplace you see it every single day. See, I really don't know what God is calling your all in to be, but you do. Like I said, if it sounds scary, if it sounds too much for you, just open the Bible. It was too much for all of God's children, every single one. By yourself, you need Him. That's the greatest feeling in the world, knowing that it's not us, but Him who's doing it through us. I said, some of you might sign this, you might put it on the edge of your desk, because you know that's a place. Maybe you've been given 90%, but just like Jesus told them in Israel, if someone asks you to go 1 mile, go 2, because you can't be a slave to someone once you decide to be their servant. You decide to change the tables. Or maybe for you, signing this chip has nothing to do with where you work, but everything to do when you walk in the door of your house, as a father, as a brother, as a son to an elderly parent. I don't know what your all-in is. Only you and only God knows. But like I said, I think He's calling us to make it more than just a slogan on the back of a t-shirt. I think He's calling all of us as men in this generation to make it a lifestyle. It's been a privilege and honor to be with you guys today. God bless you guys.